Welcome to our session, While We Teach, We Learn, channeling Seneca's philosophy to uncover our aha moments. This will be what we're going to cover today, and I'd like to introduce our participants. First, we have Noah Clinard, who's a BS Ed student here at Kutztown, future Spanish teacher, and he worked with Writers Workshop with the Modern Language Studies Department. He has been intrigued by the heritage learners, working with them, and the non-heritage learners. Dr. Dawn Slack has been tirelessly working on trying to show our students the importance of being owners of their own corrections and improvements. And through this, she works on self-evaluation and self-correction. And I teach Spanish and second language teaching methods here at Kutztown. One of my favorite activities of all times is hunting for authentic materials, Realia, what have you, that enrich the curriculum. Finally, we have our fourth participant, Seneca, who was born in 4 BC, Roman philosopher, and he brings to us the whole philosophy of our session. People learn as they teach. He also points out that we need to associate with people who we are likely to improve you. I've chosen 2 people who I know are likely to improve me, and hopefully it will be a reciprocal process. We start off with Dr. Dawn Slack, the self in self-correction and self-evaluation.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And before I really talk about self-correction and self-evaluation, I want to talk about 2 particular moments that I'm sure everyone has experienced. And we get into a fact versus fiction. One deals with the direction of learning. The fiction is that the teacher has all the font of knowledge and they impart their information to the student, who is a wonderful sponge absorbing everything that is said. We know that that's not the way that it is. Although still the ivory tower philosophy exists, we know that it really is not a reality. Because the reality, the fact is that between the teacher and the student, there is a reciprocal situation. Yes, the teacher teaches the student, but the student, by engaging with the material and engaging with the teacher, also ends up teaching the teacher. Therefore, the student becomes the teacher and the teacher becomes the student, just like Seneca. Another fact versus fiction area is dealing with the graded task return. The fiction is that it's a mutual learning moment for the faculty member and the student, a mutual aha moment, because the teacher has worked so hard to create a wonderful task, and the student works so hard to create and do that wonderful task. And then the teacher works hard again to provide all sorts of wonderful feedback. And then the student getting that feedback just pours over it, working hard to absorb everything. That does not happen. The reality of the situation is that usually the student gets the materials back and takes a 1 nanosecond look to look at the grade. But we know learning is not about the grade. And if we're lucky, maybe that work gets turned into an airplane, maybe it gets trashed, and in this eco environment, maybe it gets recycled, perhaps. Now, when we talk about self-correction and self-evaluation, for my purposes in this presentation, I'm looking at self-correction as the student receives guidance, either from the faculty member or from a peer. And then in that process, they start to see and be able to correct themselves, which is a learning process. For self-evaluation, I'm looking at the student who has purposeful reflection and self-evaluation about what they've been doing, and therefore understanding their own progress better, which also leads to a learning moment. Now, we all have been in these circumstances, but I also wanted to share some of the relevant research that I found most pertinent to this particular study. I'm going to give you just a very brief summation of these particular authors and their research. For more detailed synopsis, you can go to the Tumblr blog as I tell you more about it. When we look at Kimberly Giesling, her main concern is about student-centered environments in which teacher and student communication can increase, particularly with the goal of helping the students be able to recognize their own progress. But she highlights something very important, and that is that the student must have very clear instructions. What is the task? Why is it being done? How is it to be done? And how do they self-correct? Lazo Rivarola also continues with this idea of self-correction, but she differentiates between self-correction and reformulation. Self-correction she defines as students receiving feedback from the faculty member and then working in the classroom to make those self-corrections. while reformulation is the student working with a native peer, a native speaker peer to help them along. Chandra also talks about the teacher as the guide or the mentor or the facilitator, also a student-centered performance, and the student must act, however. That is the most important thing, that the student has to take that control, has to take that action. Young also deals with this, but in an online environment. And I thought it was very important to include something about online self-correction, particularly now that everybody has been doing, because of the shift due to COVID, online environments, of course, although online work has been existing before COVID. Young really focuses on how the student is actually actively choosing to self-evaluate and to self-correct. And therefore, by that act of the student choosing, the student is more engaged in their own learning. And then finally, Trachtenberg and Giacometti talk about weblogs, which is also very relevant to this particular session. I'll explain why toward the end of my time. But they focus on self-expression, self-evaluation, and most importantly, that through the blogs, students start to use the language in an authentic context. And they start to kind of forget about the self-correcting because they actually are now using it in a real way, and that is very engaging for them. Now, two tasks I want to share with you from the 103 level, which would be about the third semester college level. One deals with a journaling exercise and self-correction. And part of the rubric, not the whole rubric, but part of the rubric is that there is improvement from the original to the final, as well as from the first journal to the second journal. And important in this process is that the student is guided to how to self-correct. The way that this works is that they do have the assignment. I collect their journals. I do mark them according to an editorial key. But before I turn that back to them, I take one sentence from every journal. I create a master document, and we practice how to correct. And this eases some of the anxiety about it because one, it's kind of fun to find your sentence. Two, you realize everybody has made mistakes. And then three, at the end of this, well, then they have a wonderful list of good corrections. And they also see when they get theirs back, well, while our master document had a mistake in every single sentence, theirs did not. So they already feel more empowered. And you can read the student comments there. The second deals with self-evaluation in this particular course, and it's more an oral-based activity. And in here, as part of a scaffolded larger project, the first steps are that the student has to record themselves doing practice scenarios using the I can statements from ACTFL. That is in Spanish in the L2. Then they must listen to themselves and record a self-evaluation in English. What do they feel that they did well? What do they feel that they could improve upon? And after we get over the fact that nobody likes how they sound on video, as well as that they have to have realistic expectations because it is only level 3, I think students also found it very useful. Please ignore the blog comments at the bottom, just follow the arrows to the next slide, which is this one. This is 2 activities in what would be a 6th semester language course at the university level. And here we do 2 kinds of activities. One is dealing with translations that involve self-correction throughout the semester. These translations are short quotes from business leaders throughout the world, sometimes Spanish to English translations, sometimes English to Spanish. And we really delve into that translation is both a science and an art. And I really tend to think that it's more of an art. But self-correction throughout is important because, again, it is part of the rubric, not the whole rubric. And then another task in that particular course is doing a journaling exercise that is the Quien es un líder yo. This is also a scaffold activity where the first journal has them observing leaders that are known figures throughout the world and picking out characteristics. The second is picking out leaders in their immediate context, their friends, their neighbors, their family, their teachers, their coaches. And then finally, the self-evaluative, when are they a leader? When are they not a leader? And again, you can see the student comments. It's a little bit awkward to begin with, but they unanimously say that it is a good exercise. Now, I want to comment here briefly about the blogging. And originally for this whole PSMLA panel session, Dr. Zimmerman had the initial idea, and that was we were going to be using blogs to share different topics. We had 5 participant members on our panel, and then some things happened along the way. One, because of having to switch to the recorded format, we lost 2 of our presenters, and then we all had to learn how to record the session, and then we had to deal with blogs. And we ourselves had to become learners. And here's a shout out to our wonderful tech guru, Cliff, who helped us along with Tumblr. We had to learn how to set up the accounts. We had to learn how to post. We also learned that all 3 of us had very different visions for what our Tumblr accounts and our blogs for this previous LA conference looked like. We had some kerfuffles along the way, and one of them was that we really were not getting the follow through from the learning community that we had hoped for. That's why I left all the blog comments in these original slides. I had hoped to include comments. We didn't have those comments, but that's okay. This is part of Seneca's teacher learner. We as teachers, we learned a lot through this. We've also learned, you have to push the limits, you have to try new items, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't quite, but you still learn. And having said that, then I am going to switch off to our next colleague for this presentation, Noah Clinard.
Thank you, Dr. Slack, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for that wonderful bundle of information you just gave to us. All right, so my topic is going to be about working with heritage learners. So basically, from my experience, I would like to start off and describe to you what a heritage learner is. A heritage learner studies a language. So for example, a heritage learner studies Spanish as the language, and they also possess a personal cultural connection with the language. So an example of a heritage learner would be a student who studies Spanish and their parents are native Spanish speakers. And they were born in the United States, but their parents are from that Spanish-speaking country. So the reason that I chose this topic was because first is preconceived notions that I had before working with heritage learners. My major at Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, which is Spanish and secondary education. My minor is English as a second language. My experiences through a writer's workshop and helping me to connect the dots through it all. So first, starting with the preconceived notions. My preconceived notion of heritage learners were that they were fluent in the language and they knew grammar extremely well, and that they were able to just verbally speak the language perfectly, and that they made no mistakes and that their grammar was perfect. Based on my major that I have been studying for the past 2 years, I have learned that that is not always the case, and that is not usually the case for heritage learners or any learner of a language or major of a language. And I had the wonderful opportunity to do a writer's workshop in the spring of 2021 semester, and I was an editor for students who took Spanish composition classes, and I was able to help them write their papers and to edit their papers from what they had into something different and help them form topics and help them to be able to cohesively write papers that are in the Spanish language. So my personal experiences working with heritage learners were in Spanish 212, which is Spanish composition in my freshman semester of college, my very first Spanish class that I walked into, which was full of juniors and seniors, which was extremely intimidating to me. And then I also took Spanish 325, which is advanced syntax and stylistics in Spanish. And then I also had the modern language studies writer's workshop. So in Spanish composition, that was my first class of writing papers in the Spanish language. And I worked with a lot of people who were heritage learners in the class. And working with them helped me to learn that they have even more so sometimes trouble with grammar than regular just learners of the language do. And what made me realize this is just the conjugations of verbs and the verb tenses. I feel that a lot of students who are learning the language focus so much on grammar, and they want everything to look perfect, whereas heritage learners more so do what they think sounds right. And what I mean by that is that they do it and they think that that's what sounds correct, and sometimes it's not always the most grammatically correct thing. And it's just a difference of learning the language academically and speaking the language in a whole. And then through the writer's workshop, again, I was able to help people edit their papers and was able to help students, native speakers, and regular learners of the language how to fix their papers and how to properly just get their ideas across in another language, which was extremely fun and very enriching for me as a student and a future teacher. So my findings of working with heritage learners are heritage learners versus second language learners were the grammar aspect of things and the aspect of formatting the paper and how people break it down. It's just very different, and it was very interesting to me to learn what they do versus what heritage learners would do. And going back to connecting the dots to Seneca's philosophy of as we teach, we learn, I have learned much information as I have taught, and I do not think that I would have learned anything close to that if I had not done writer's workshop or learned with any of the heritage language learners. Now I'm going to offer you to Dr. Zimmerman.
Thank you so much, Noah. It's lovely to have our former students come back and serve our community in our PSMLA. Thank you, Noah, for that. So I'm going to talk about authentic material, which has always been one of my absolute favorite parts of teaching. What is authentic material? Well, you probably know it's not written for the classroom, and according to Noonan, it's been produced for purposes other than to teach language. It's produced for the speakers of the target language. And if I refer back to one of my favorite texts to teach with, Making the Match by Curtin and Dahlberg, they have a tremendous unit section on how to create a thematic unit. And when we do that, what's the number one thing we need to think about? It's the theme. That's not grammar, it's a theme. So they recommend that you ensure a balance between language, the linguistic element, the culture, and the content. Subject, content, outcomes, that's the theme. That's probably the most important part of your thematic unit. What is the language function? What is the communicative function of the language that you're looking at in this unit? And then, of course, your cultural objectives, which is right up there with the content. You've got to balance these, not have one any more important than the others when you're searching for materials. Another one of my favorite parts of authentic material is Realia. And language teachers are known for traveling, and we collect, and we find things that make it real. So they involve all 5 senses. Think about what senses, think about what cultural elements, and think about what linguistic components we can add to these different pieces of Realia here, these items. Currency, who's on it? What country is it from? Does it help us remember the numbers? What prizes do we give as language teachers? Chupa chups. Menus, of course, with food, which is probably the most important cultural item that we can have. Papers from traveling. What is Renfe? What would your students think? Where are we? What country are we in? What's the currency? There are just so many things that we can do with Realia. But what I'm going to talk to you the most about here is the authentic text. And remember to keep that balance in mind. When we look for authentic text, we're looking for the culture, we're looking for the linguistic element, and we're looking for the content. Well, I had a certain chapter that I really wanted to add a lot of punch to, get more bang for the buck. The content was fine arts and Spain, and I chose music because I absolutely love music. What is the function? What do I want to be able to do? What is our goal here? We want to be able to give information, narrating in the past, and describing. What particular structures did I have in mind? Well, believe it or not, past participles used as adjectives, perfect tenses. That's a lot to look for in one piece of authentic text. So how do we search in the age of the internet? Well, first of all, I had to think to myself, okay, something has happened, something describing. And finally, I honestly don't know how this magical piece arrived, but Eureka, I found the obituary of one of the most famous Spanish composers, Joaquin Rodrigo. And you can read his wonderful obituary. There's the link. I won't put that up now in lack of time. But this obituary, it's several pages. It's just full of information. And it leads us to even more. Not only is his life describing the participles, the culture, the content, it's all there, but on top of it, they leave us with some pieces of music, which if I had more time, I would play for you. Please go to YouTube and listen to his Concierto de Aranjuez, and this is the Adagio movement. It's phenomenal, and Joaquin has brought the guitar to the symphony here. I mean, this is absolutely innovative. People don't realize it. People don't know who Joaquin Rodrigo is. And furthermore, this piece of music, which is so wonderful, it has inspired others. Miles Davis, American jazz trumpetist Miles Davis, took the same piece, turned it into a fabulous jazz version. And again, please take the time and listen to this. Hear the differences. So after we read and after we think about this wonderful blind composer's life, what can we do with this other than read and learn about Joaquin Rodrigo and his music? Well, we listen to both pieces and we encourage critical thinking. We get our students, number one, they do not have a whole lot of vocabulary for describing music. That's necessary to bring forward. And we encourage them to compare and contrast. Which piece do they like better and why? And are they able to do this in Spanish? And that basically brings me to the end of my authentic materials. But what are we going to do? How are we going to share what we learn as we teach? That is actually the harder part. We have created, as Dr. Slack mentioned, we created a Tumblr blog with a lot of help from somebody more techie than me. And here are the directions. I invite you, please, if you have any interest at all, please go to this Tumblr blog. You can see where we are. Go to our separate blogs, comment, add your own. There's nothing better than for you to say, and this is how I use authentic materials. We are just waiting patiently for you to blog with us. So on this note, we come to the end. It's been a journey. It's been hard. It's been fascinating. The blogs, no, they didn't work, but maybe with your help, they will work. And moving forward, what would we like to do? Continue to learn as we teach, but share it. How do we share it? How can we make all these wonderful ideas that Noah and Dr. Slack, what they talked about today, how can we make it part of our regular teaching routine and become owners? And that's my question that I leave with you today.
Although I will own a mistake, and that is that I did mispronounce Noah's name. I'm older than dirt, and I had just asked him before him, but I do want to make that right because I will own my mistakes, because it is from our mistakes and it is from trying that we do learn and we do have those aha moments. In the next slide, we do also show all of our email addresses. So do feel free, if you don't want to contact us through the blogs, you can certainly contact us through the email. We welcome all communication.
To reiterate what Dr. Slack said, first of all, totally fine if she mispronounced my last name. It happens. And that's why we self-correct and self-evaluate. And we thank you so much for listening and to watching this video. And please do not hesitate to email any of us. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions.